Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia has caused a big stir on the left by saying that not only will he not vote to end the filibuster, but even to weaken it. And this is now causing, well, a big fluster on the left. Here is someone from the group called Young Turks reacting in a very negative way. Listen.
Conservative lawmaker who's still somehow registered as a Democrat, Joe Manchin, has now backed away from his openness to possibly reform the legislative filibuster in the Senate. In an op-ed that was published in the Washington Post, Manchin argued, quote, "There is no circumstance in which I will vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. The time has come to end these political games and to usher a new era of bipartisanship where we find common ground on the major policy debates facing our nation." Wait, how exactly do you find bipartisan solutions to issues when the Republican Party literally tried to overturn the results of the election? How do you work with them? How do you have the, I'll say, guts to speak to the American people and argue that the people playing the tricks are the ones who want to do away with the legislative filibuster that effectively allows for bills to go to the Senate to die? It's just so pathetic and ridiculous. I can't stand this man.
How can you have bipartisan? Well, I'll tell you how you can. Let's take the issue of voting reform. The way you can have bipartisan progress on this is that each side brings what is most important about it to the table. So Democrats care most about expanding access. Republicans care most about making sure that the people who vote are eligible to vote. Now, isn't it possible to meet both those goals at the same time? Isn't it possible that each side's legitimate concern can be addressed? Yes, but that process is not taking place. So that's what Joe Manchin is talking about. Well, the left isn't interested in any of this. What they're interested in is how can we browbeat Joe Manchin? What can we get out of our grab bag that will make him change his mind? Can we sort of strong arm him? And the answer is, let's play the Jim Clyburn card. Let's sort of bring in this African-American guy who's going to start talking about, my grandfather was sitting on a rocking chair and he couldn't vote. And let's try to intimidate Joe Manchin by playing the good old race card. Now, I wish that Joe Manchin, like me, would have heard this 100 times and would basically let out a massive yawn or fire something out of my rear end, because we're not exactly impressed by this kind of nonsense. You know, I would respond with a massive Swalwell if I heard from Jim Clyburn. This is now your great-grandfather. Well, let me tell you about my great-grandfather in India. You know, he ate a lot of beans, let me tell ya. Well, so the race card is the big thing that they're trying to play, and there's a basic fallacy that's going on here. The basic fallacy is that the filibuster was used by Southerners. Here's an article on the racist history of the filibuster. It's by a guy named Jonathan Baird in the Concord Monitor. And he keeps talking about how Southern senators did this and Southern senators did that. Now, I notice a very notable omission. He never says Democrats. He never points out that the racists who used the filibuster to try to block civil rights laws were in the main Democrats. He talks about Senator Robert C. Byrd of West Virginia spoke for over 14 hours. Democrat. Somebody who has been called a mentor by both Obama and Hillary. So suddenly Robert Byrd is on the outs because he used the filibuster, a racist tool, and so on. The article also points out that the filibuster was used to fight against anti-lynching laws, and the author pretends to be like really indignant about this. Now, what he carefully leaves out of his article is the fact that FDR, the sainted progressive, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, cut a deal with Democratic racists in his own party to block anti-lynching legislation. So this was a deal made inside of the Democratic Party by the most lionized Democrat of the 20th century. This is what was going on. So the problem again here is not the filibuster. It's kind of like saying, you know, a car slammed into the sidewalk killing 3 people. the car was used for a terrible purpose, let's outlaw the car. Now, the reason no one says that is because they realize that the car isn't the problem. Cars have multiple perfectly good uses. The filibuster has multiple perfectly good uses. It's an effort to balance the power between the majority party and the minority party. It's to make sure that there is discussion and an attempt to sort of meet the other side. So the filibuster serves all these non-racist purposes. And when the car slams into the sidewalk, you don't blame the car because you say, who is the maniac behind the wheel? What was that guy trying to accomplish? So the evilness of the car depends on the evilness of the driver and the objectives and motives of that guy. So the filibuster was racist when it was in the hands of Democrats. The filibuster was racist when people like FDR were able to manipulate it to their own end. But there's nothing about the filibuster itself that's racist. And so just as cars, when driven by other people for other purposes, like going to the grocery store, taking me to the airport so I can get on a flight, those are benign and normal uses of the car. The Republicans are attempting normal use of the filibuster for political purposes with a whole range of legislation that pertains to guns, legislation that pertains to taxes, legislation that pertains to the budget, and on and on and on. So to pretend like this is all about a racial agenda, that the filibuster is nothing more than a tool of white supremacy, the Democrats actually know better. Why? Because they were the very gangsters that misused the filibuster in those ways. And now the very same people who did that are showing up pretending to have erased all that history, or at least to take that history and use it to blame the country, blame the Republicans. They're blaming the other party for trying to do all the mean and racist stuff that is a part of their own history.